Now, shall we begin?
The one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you.
Greetings, sentients! Welcome back to 2001's Robots in Disguise.
走れ走れ闇を貫けスーパーソニック遥か空へと響くエクソソの命の鼓動が聞こえるかトランスフォームゴーボーイゴーボーイ炎のバッドライブファイアーコンボイ赤い閃光誰もが輝く命一つカンロボットカンロボットカンロボットサイバトロ
Now you might have noticed the theme song was different this time. That's because that was the Car Robots opening. Like we mentioned in a previous episode, it's slightly longer than Robots in Disguise's opening, which is why often Robots in Disguise episodes are actually slightly longer than Car Robots. Well, they'll re-loop animations or even go over the same subject matter more than once in order to pad out the episode. Today's episode, episode 2, is an explosive situation, and introduces perhaps the most hated Transformer character of this era, Sky-Byte.
What's that? You must be kidding me. It's a shark!
Listen, pal, I think you'd better go back to sleep. This night shift really is getting to you. Whoa!
Snack! I need more energy, and I believe I know where to find it!
Now we're going to take a time out here and discuss Sky-Byte a little bit in depth. This is the first time we've seen this character. He wasn't in the first episode or mentioned, and he kind of comes right out of nowhere. In fact, I'm not even sure, at least in the American version here, that he's actually part of Megatron's team at this point. Sky-Byte kind of comes off in these earlier episodes as a freelancer who seems to have just shown up on Earth almost at random and then simply have attached himself to the local group of Predacon. Now, to put Sky-Byte in context, you have to step back for a moment. Remember, about half of Robots in Disguise's toy line are repaints of previous toys. This goes for virtually all of the Predacons with the exception of Megatron. Sky-Byte's original model was the Transmetal 2 variant of Cybershark. Now you've probably not ever heard of Cybershark or are familiar with that name, but he's quite possibly the most popular toy character of Beast Wars. And by toy character, I mean a character who does not appear in the TV show or really any other form of media. There's really just the toy and the little bio that used to come on the back of the box. Unfortunately, Hasbro doesn't really do this anymore. But this actually went all the way back to the 80s originally. They provide a sort of bio and tech specs on the character. It would give you an idea how powerful the character was, what its skills were, and something about the character's personality. This seems to have gone out of fashion really about Robots in Disguise's time. They still did it to some degree, but more half-hearted during this era. And then Armada sank it completely. It's occasionally popped back up from time to time in Transformers Generations, but tends to be pretty rare. Anyway, Cybershark originally transformed into a hammerhead shark, and he was a maximal bounty hunter. He was a pretty cool looking toy, quite popular. In fact, in Japan, Takara liked his model so much, they retooled it not once but twice. Once for Beast Wars 2 and a second time for Beast Wars Neo. That's how popular that the figure was. With Hasbro, the character was in fact popular enough, he was one of the few rare figures, the toy characters, that actually got a Transmetal 2 variant. And at that point in Beast Wars, they had never redone a toy character before. Show characters had gotten new models, but toy characters hadn't, and he was one of, I believe, 3 toy characters to get an upgrade. With this upgrade, he was changed, his beast mode was changed from a hammerhead shark to a tiger shark. I'm not necessarily sure why, but there you go. Again, the Transmetal 2 line was during the 3rd season of Beast Wars, and there seemed to be a slight running theme of changing characters' beast modes at the time. It's only a handful, but most notably, of course, is Megatron, who in Beast Wars was a Tyrannosaurus Rex, or Tyrant Lizard, the Dinosaur King, which is quite fitting for his alt mode. But in the 3rd season, he changed it for a dragon form. But he wasn't the only character to swap Beast mode. Previously, in Beast Wars, there had been a character during the 1st season era of the toy line called Prowl, who transformed into a lion. He also got an upgrade and transformed into a Transmetal 2 owl during the 3rd season. Although some people consider this to be a separate character. Quite possibly the original Prowl actually combined with 2 other Transformers to make the only maximal combiner, Magnaboth. Having him transform into an owl now means he no longer combines with them. Who knows, possibly the other 2 were killed off, and he was the only survivor. However, there have been some people who considered this Prowl to be a separate Transformer altogether. But Cybershark was another one who got a different beast mode. He's still a shark, but a different type of shark, and distinctly different. The hammerhead has a signature look. There's a reason they're called hammerhead sharks. Tiger sharks are a more generic shark look. I think the real-life shark has stripes, but Cybershark did not. Regardless, the Transmetal 2 Cybershark is perhaps not quite as beloved as the original, but still considered one of the high benchmarks of Beast Wars. A very successful, very well put together model. Its only real weakness are particularly what's in robot mode, these shoulder pads. They do have a tendency to fall off in transforming sometimes, and can be a little bit tricky. Sky-Byte was actually retooled to make this easier. But other than that, he's just a straight up repaint of Cybershark. And not a particularly good one. Sky-Byte is supposed to be a great white shark. However, you'll notice he's actually primarily blue more than he's white. And he's not particularly great white shark looking. Again, great whites, I want to say they are the largest non-extinct shark currently. I'm not 100% positive. Whale sharks might be bigger, but nevertheless, great whites are among the largest sharks, and they do kind of have a distinct profile, which Sky-Byte's definitely lacking. But again, this toy was not made from the ground up. It's a repaint of a tiger shark. So if you are an expert in sharks and Sky-Byte doesn't look quite right to you, that's why. If you're not an expert in sharks, he probably looks fine. Anyway, like I said, the character of Cyber Shark, this sort of maximal bounty hunter character, was quite beloved with the fan base. Admittedly small one, as I said, he wasn't a show character. But his models were highly popular and very successful. So many fans were very disappointed in the characterization of Sky-Byte. Some of them feeling like it was a bit of an insult to Cyber Shark, as Sky-Byte is pretty much the opposite of cool. He's not too bad in these earlier episodes. Sky-Byte is one of the few Transformers who actually has something of a character arc in Robots in Disguise. Admitted, a very vague one. And basically the majority of his story arc is from mildly competent to just as incompetent as the Three Stooges. That's basically where Sky-Byte goes. In these earlier episodes, he at least seems like he knows what he's doing for the most part. And the other Predacons, and even the Autobots to some degree, seem to actually have at least some level of respect for him. The Three Stooges appear to actually be afraid of him, almost in the same way they're afraid of Megatron. And the Autobots do seem like they treat him as a genuine threat. Not something they're afraid of, per se, but they do seem slightly more hesitant to confront him at times. That said, he's not really any more successful than any of the other Predacons. And as the show progresses, he actually becomes more incompetent and more cowardly. Not to mention also even develops something of a depression about his failure, which I suppose makes the character at least mildly aware of his situation within the show, which for Robots in Disguise is admittedly somewhat rare. Now, he actually does have a slightly further story arc that redeemed him in some people's eyes. We'll deal with that story arc later. For now, what we have here is the still mildly competent, apparently freelancer Sky-Byte. Now, there's a bit of an interesting thing to note here. You'll perhaps notice from the clip from before, Sky-Byte swims both through the ground and through the air. This is a bit of an interesting little attribute of the character, and one that actually is more in-depth than you might expect. Now, one note, Sky-Byte's Beast Mode is the only one of the Predacons in the show that doesn't have legs. So, admittedly, for a show that primarily takes 99% of the time on the land, it's a bit difficult to utilize this Beast Mode on a daily episode basis. So, how do you resolve this? Admittedly, if you are in charge of a show and you are told to use this character, this is a bit of a conundrum. What do you do? Perhaps one method of this is admittedly to make him swim through more than just water. And admittedly, remember, Sky-Byte is an alien robot. He's from another planet and is from a very high technological society. So it's not admittedly impossible that Sky-Byte could be modified in some way beyond Earth science to allow him to perform these feats. It even helps, of course, the fact that he's actually a cyborg shark and not a realistic-looking shark. Remember that the Predacons here, the repaints, were based off the Transmetal 2s from Beast Wars, which were cyborg. What's interesting, though, again, he's a repaint of the Transmetal 2 Cyber Shark. One of the oddities, and one of the reasons why the character was so well liked as a toy character, Cyber Shark actually had a vehicle mode. And this is particularly of note because while vehicle modes were common to Transmetals, Transmetal 2s are not the same. A Transmetal is kind of a throwback to the old 80s style. They're robotic animals, although more organic looking, kind of like Colossus from the X-Men. And they kind of have an inverted situation, a robotic animal mode, but a bizarrely organic robot mode. It's quite weird looking, actually. The show toned it down, I think wisely. And then the third attribute, of course, with them, the robotic animal mode, organic robot mode, is then was their vehicle mode. Now, vehicle mode's being a bit generous. Transmetals didn't actually have a true vehicle mode, in the sense they turned it into an actual car or truck or plane or something. It was actually their beast mode, but with vehicle components, like jet engines and wings, or motorcycle tires coming out, or dragster wheels and exhaust pipes, and things like that. Actually, some of the toys were sold describing it as a transportation mode, which might actually be a little bit more accurate. But it's more commonly known as a vehicle mode, even though, like I said, it's not a true vehicle. Transmetal 2s, on the other hand, are not the same. They're cyborgs, and they're kind of cyborgs in both forms, actually. The beast mode has the robotic cybernetic parts, but their robot modes tend to be very animalistic as well, and still kind of retain a very cyborg look. Some of them actually even will have a few vehicle components as part of them. Cheetor in the show actually had a rocket strapped to the back of his Transmetal 2 beast mode. He didn't have a vehicle mode per se. The rocket was just simply part of his beast mode, and he didn't go through any sort of transformation to use it. And he's not the only character. Darkscream, who's repainted from Night Glider, actually has vehicle components as well. If you look closely, you'll notice he actually has VTOL engines into, again, not wings, but the skin flaps that attach to his arms that let true flying squirrels glide. This provided Night Glider with low-level flight, and presumably provides the same to Darkscream, who's actually also capable of flight, as he'll mention in this episode. These VTOL engines are wide. Now, Cybershark also had vehicle components, but unlike the other Transmetal 2s, his were actually folded away inside the shark body, and he actually had a very minor transformation to a vehicle mode that basically gave him a flight mode. Again, a low-altitude flight mode, the bio described it. Basically, jet engines come off the side, extends his side fins to be more like wings, limitedly, and a back pair of fins detached to make it more like a plane tail. And weapons become active as well on the figure that are not supposed to be used in beast mode. So technically, Sky-Byte, being a repaint of the Transmetal 2 Cybershark, actually has this vehicle mode. Indeed, the model, if you buy the toy, retains it. So, interestingly, the people behind Robots in Disguise apparently came to the solution to make use of this flight mode, but not to bother animating him transforming into it. Instead, Sky-Byte can simply fly in beast mode, which, granted, with Transmetal vehicle modes, there's not a lot of difference between their beast modes and vehicle modes. But still, it's not like it would have been particularly difficult to animate. I'm, in fact, not really sure why they didn't. Only really two distinct possibilities come to mind. If you have any of your own theories, feel free to comment on them below. But my thought is either A, the animators really liked the idea of a shark swimming through the air and or ground, and so wanted to do that, or B, it's an effort to keep Megatron more unique. Remember, Megatron at this point in Robots in Disguise is a six-changer, although, again, we've only seen 5 of his modes, and we won't see any new ones in this episode either. But nevertheless, he actually does have 6 modes. Possibly, Sky-Byte doesn't use his third mode in order to make Megatron seem more special, that he's got multiple modes and he's the only one. Again, perhaps the Japanese make more mention of this. The American version, at least, never draws attention to Megatron's multiple forms. No one ever mentions it or calls it out or in any way ever talks about it. He simply changes into the mode whenever he needs one, and everyone treats it as normal. So, if that is the case, it's a bit weird how they don't actually do anything with Megatron's multiple alternate forms. But Sky-Byte's not the only if you will, triple changer in Robots in Disguise. There actually are other Transformers that have third modes as well, but don't use them. Megatron's the only character that really uses multiple forms.
Koji, we have a Predacon alert. I'll pick you up a block north of your present location.
1 block north of my house. Gotcha, Optimus. I'm on my way there right now. Huh?
No, Optimus! Wait, that's Koji, not Shia LaBeouf! Don't run him over!
Hurry, Koji. This is an emergency.
Whoa! What are you running on? Jet fuel? What's all the commotion about, Optimus? Where are we going?
Not far. I'll explain everything when we get there.
Ah!
Optimus Prime, transform!
Holy cow! What is this place?
This is Cybertron Base, the Autobots' secret underground headquarters.
Wow!
Now you'll notice that Optimus Prime tells Koji that there is an emergency and they must come at once, and won't even tell him what it is till they get to the base. Yet once they're there, Koji doesn't do anything. Why is he here? Optimus explains to Koji that the Predacons are stealing batteries, specifically car batteries, because the Predacons are searching for power. In fact, we'll learn shortly that the Predacons are desperate for power. They've used up all their energy just to get here to Earth. Which does leave a question of what exactly was Megatron's plan here. Why didn't he stock up on enough energy before coming? Did something happen? Is he fleeing something? Did they run out of energy wherever he was, and coming to Earth is a desperate attempt to get more? We don't really know. All we know is the Predacons are after it, and they've apparently decided that car batteries are the most efficient way to go about getting it. Either way, what exactly is Koji going to contribute to this? So here we're introduced to the Autobots' base, rather unimaginatively referred to as Cybertron Base, which is a bit awkward of a name considering that their planet is called Cybertron. I suppose it makes sense that they might name it after the planet, but it's really sort of awkward to say Cybertron Base. Be like saying Earth Base. And you would expect Earth Base to be on Earth. But Cybertron Base is not on Cybertron, it's on Earth. But they really only ever call it this in this episode. It's typically simply referred to as Autobot Headquarters, which admittedly rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. This room is pretty much it. We don't really see much of anything else. Unfortunately, they don't really expand or explore the base. A bit like Beast Machines, perhaps, the Maximals would often have random bases that we really never knew much of the layout of. But unlike Beast Wars, in which both the Axelon and to a lesser degree the Darkseid were actually, to some degree, explored, and you became familiar with the setting. For Robots in Disguise, however, this room is pretty much the base. As you can see, it is a secret base, it's underground, and the entrance is hidden in what appears to be some type of car garage, which does keep into the theme of robots in disguise hiding from humans, which the show is going to ruin later in this very episode.
Autobots does it take to run this operation?
Our systems are controlled by a proactive cybernetic interface program. We call it TIE, which is short for Tactical Artificial Intelligence.
Hello, Optimus. I see you've brought along a visitor.
Yes, TIE. This is my friend, Koji, Dr. Onishi's son.
Nice to meet you, Koji. Any friend of Optimus is a friend of mine. I'm Tai, Tactical Artificial Intelligence System, daughter of the Teletron 1 computer program.
Nice to meet you too, Tai.
Sorry, I should have told you. I'm a holographic projection, not a physical entity.
Huh?
I'm a proactive, self-initializing program that constantly scans the entire planet in order to alert the Autobots if it looks like the Predacons are up to something.
Now here we're given a formal introduction to TIE, the Autobot's tactical intelligence computer. You will notice there is a name drop here. She refers to herself as the daughter of the Teletron 1 program. That's a reference to the original cartoon back in the 80s. The ARC, which served as the Autobot base for the first 2 seasons, was run by an artificial intelligence program called Teletran 1. It's a fairly minor character, if you will. I don't believe it's actually sentient. And of course, it doesn't transform or anything, so there's no toy of it. TIE, on the other hand, seems like she may actually be an artificial intelligence. Presumably, she doesn't have a spark crystal, unless there's one stuck in a wall somewhere. But she seems to be sentient, unlike most computers. Most Transformers shows, it's not uncommon for there to be a sort of shipboard or computer of some kind. But it's usually more in the Star Trek version. If you've ever seen the Next Generation era shows, where the computer is capable of talking and interacting, but it's not actually sentient. TIE, on the other hand, actually seems to be capable of basic emotions and even decision-making processes. Yes, she does follow orders, but then all of the Autobots follow Optimus's orders, so she's not any different than they are. And they're all robots too, of course. We don't actually know if they have spark crystals. Presumably they do. I think it's technically understood, but Robots in Disguise never really shows it or talks about it. It just kind of goes unmentioned. So presumably TIE doesn't have one, of course. It's interesting. She's the only computer that I'm aware of in Transformers to use a holographic avatar, and you'd think Koji would realize that that's what she was, seeing her materialize in front of him like that, but apparently he thinks she's a real girl or something. Or possibly he's seen Star Trek Voyager and thinks she's a hard-light hologram. In any which case, the reaction is a very Red Dwarf Rimmer hologram reaction.
Wait, just look at that paint job! Not to mention those custom wheels. Very classy. Hello, you beautiful sports car. I'd share my garage with you anytime.
That guy's nuts. He's talking to my car.
You move like a dream, and the purr of your engine is music to my ears.
Go listen to somebody else's engine.
Hey, wait a minute. You don't understand. Can't we talk about this? Come on, have a heart, will ya?
Now here we're once again subjected to Sideburn's flirting. Like I said, this is a running gag throughout Robots in Disguise, especially in the first half. And it's a bit bizarre. As I've mentioned before, there are no female Transformers ever seen in Robots in Disguise. Doesn't mean they don't exist technically, but we never see them, and they're never mentioned. But the Autobots still seem to be aware of the concept of flirting, which suggests that there probably are female Transformers out there. However, his flirting with an Earth car would seem to be the equivalent of a human flirting with a mannequin. After all, it's not a robot, it's not sentient, it doesn't have a real computer on it, maybe computer chips, depending on how modern the car is, but it has absolutely no type of personality programming. And in fact, Sideburn doesn't necessarily seem to differentiate between the car and the driver. He'll often react to Kelly as if she's the car talking. And it's a bit difficult to tell if he's actually aware that humans drive cars and they're not part of the car. Either way, this gets very old very quickly. Fortunately, we're not the only people annoyed by this. So is his older brother Prowl.
Enough of the fun and games, Sideburn. We've got work to do. All right, I was just taking a little break to, well, introduce myself. We're on full-time emergency patrol, remember? No breaks allowed until we catch those battery thieves. But we've been out here for days and haven't seen a thing. How are we supposed to find these guys? By covering as much ground as we can. Now let's get back to it. That little red sports car could be their next target. I'd better follow her. Ha! As far as I could tell, the only one targeting that little red sports car is you, little brother. Hey, a bot's gotta rev up his engine once in a while. Besides, I'm not the only one having a little fun. X-Brawn is too. Here, check him out. He's not climbing it for fun. It'll be easier to spot the Predacons from up there.
Man, oh man, my poor aching tires. You'd think whoever built this here contraption would have at least put in a freight elevator. Prowl, when I get down from here, you're gonna owe me a new set of shocks.
Now this scene is a call back to the first episode. You remember that X-Brawn is supposed to be a kind of off-road cowboy wilderness type, and that he likes to climb mountains. This is again another running gag throughout the show, is that X-Brawn will constantly climb buildings. In fact, as you remember, he even attempted in the Japanese version to fool Slapper into thinking that he thought skyscrapers were mountains. So here again we see him climbing. I don't know how realistic this really is. I kind of feel that probably, again, we could argue that being an alien robot, X-Brawn has superior mobility and therefore can actually make these turns up these stairs without driving off. But would they actually hold someone of his weight?
Come on, there's nothing to worry about. Hey, you gotta loosen up, bro. You keep surging like that and your transmission will wear out. You leave my transmission out of this! Whoa! Hey, come on, man, I'm just trying to have some fun! Hey, watch it!
Now this is also one of the reasons why Sideburn was quite unpopular, at least early on in the series. Basically, again, his character is admittedly a bit more narcissistic and self-serving, and he's very much obsessed with having fun. Yes, the Predacons may have invaded the Earth, humans' lives may be in danger, but that doesn't mean Sideburn can't have some fun. And if handled right, this would have been fine. Cheetor's an example of this being handled well. The character does like to have fun, but not in a dangerous battle situation. He's serious and down to business, hot-headed, but he's here, he's present, he's in the now. Sideburn, the way his character is written, is portrayed that he doesn't want to help anyone. He's not interested in defending the Earth. Now the only thing he wants to do is go off and have a good time, all of the time. And it gets to be quite grating, especially when these are supposed to be our heroic Autobots. Even more so if you came off of here watching Beast Wars and Beast Machines, where the Autobots and Decepticons were talked about and treated as if they were near mythical warriors. And then they have Sideburn here. It's quite the letdown from the build-up, if you will, unintentionally, that the Beast Wars era gave the original Autobots and Decepticons. Now granted, these aren't the original Autobots. But still, this is, for most people, this is their modern introduction to Autobots. The 80s was, 2 decades ago almost at this point. Decade and a half anyway. So for most people nowadays, unless you were a kid back in the 80s, this was the first time you were really introduced to Autobots. And it's not exactly a shining example of the most an Autobot can be.
We must find a new source of energy. Our mobile command center has been stuck here in the same spot for too long. The only way we can keep its existence a secret from the Autobots is by constantly changing its location. But our voyage to Earth used up almost all of our energy to power our trans-warp cells.
You know, it probably also helped to keep it a secret if you turned off the blinking lights on it. It's probably sure to attract someone's attention. Minor thing here, trans-warp cell's another call-out. That term actually comes from Beast Wars. A trans-warp cell is kind of the equivalent of a warp core, I guess. It's how the Transformers power their trans-warp drive, which allows them interstellar travel. It's not important. It's just dropped in as a little Easter egg by the American version of the show.
Megatron! We brought back lots of energy, boss!
Excellent! Well done, Slapper! Convert it to Energon cubes and recharge the fuel cells! After that, we'll move the base to a new location. How is this energy being stored and how long will it take to convert?
It's stored in little round canisters. They're used in something called flashlights, and we got thousands of them! Great score, huh? Of course, we'll have to convert it to Energon, and that'll take a little while. I don't think it'll take more than a week or two. Well, 3 at the most.
Silence!
Now, the second I heard that they were after batteries, the Predacons, this joke seemed inevitable. I had hoped that when I was watching it at the time that it would be too easy, too obvious, and that robots in disguise wouldn't go there. But as you'll soon learn, nothing is too low for car robots.
We need massive quantities of energy, not little batteries!
Sorry, this is all we could find.
Anywhere.
You have failed me! Beast mode! Did you really think that the energy in those puny batteries would be enough to run this base?
Well, yeah, sorta.
Fools! I should add your energy cores to the conversion vat!
This is the only time Megatron transforms this episode, but he did at least use the right command code.
Wasting your time, Megatron. One of those flashlights is brighter than the three of them combined. Show yourself, Sky-Byte! Certainly.
Hey, what are you doing here, Sky-Byte?
Sky-Byte, terrorize!
Now this is Sky-Byte's proper introduction, and the character is introduced showing off a rather cool cloaking device type ability, which of course is so spectacularly useful that Sky-Byte will literally never use it again.
The good news is I brought you the most powerful battery the humans are capable of manufacturing. The bad news is that even this one isn't strong enough to mobilize the command center.
Now this is a minor nitpick. Robots in Disguise, like many cartoons of this era and especially before, is rife with animation errors. But there's a consistent one about Sky-Byte, and that is that the inside of his mouth, in robot mode that is rarely ever colored. They almost always leave it just white, matching his teeth. Occasionally you'll see this happen to the other Transformers, but you'll notice if you look, if you're watching, in their robot mode, generally speaking, the inside of their mouth is colored. Sky-Byte's is the opposite. It's almost never colored. I don't know why this is. It often doesn't matter how close up his head is or isn't.
All the terrorists have been placed under arrest. However, the terrorists' ultra-high energy explosive device has not yet been found. The device is hidden inside the engine of a red sports car, one of the new XC-12 models. All red XC-12s have been recalled and are being thoroughly searched.
And here we see Doris again, the Transformers Robots in Disguise's reporter character. She's not named in this episode, as is the case in most of her appearances. And indeed, this is the only time that we will see her. The terrorist organization she's mentioning is, surprise, never expanded upon. We have no idea who they were, or what they were trying to do, or what happened to them even. There's an interesting minor change from the American to Japanese version here too. In the Japanese version, all of these red sports cars have bombs in them, and one of them has already detonated, which is how the human authorities have learned about it. And so they've gone and now seized all the red sports cars of this make and model. The American version, apparently they've been tipped off about there being a bomb, and there's only the one bomb in one of these red cars. Don't necessarily know why there's a change, but it's interesting to note nonetheless.
High energy? Exactly. If we can get our hands on this device, we can dismantle it, extract the energy, and convert it for use in our fuel cells. As long as we prevent the device from detonating, it will give us all the energy we need. Then finding the bomb in that red sports car is our top priority. The only one left that hasn't been searched is being delivered to Metro City. Yes, I see. And its exact location? Right now, it's being offloaded from a ship at the Metro City docks.
What if this device is rigged to go off if you try to take it out of the car? Yeah, there's no telling what might happen. Sounds awful dangerous.
And if we get a boo-boo, the Band-Aids on Earth aren't big enough for Predacons.
Silence, you sniveling cowards!
Yeah!
Sky-Byte, I'm putting you in charge of this mission. Use whatever means necessary to retrieve that device! Your wish is my command, mighty Megatron.
Now again, this scene here is evocative of the early Sky-Byte. You'll notice the Predacons are, cower in terror when Megatron stamps his foot, but Sky-Byte's unmoved. And in fact, even his reaction to being put in charge almost makes it sound as if he could possibly be patronizing Megatron. As if perhaps the character might have an agenda of his own. This is not the only time this is suggested, but again, it's only in the early Sky-Byte.
Just what I've always wanted! A red XC12 with a leather interior and a CD player, too! All right!
Now here again is Kelly, for her second appearance in this episode, and one has to wonder exactly who this woman is. Apparently she's having a red sports car delivered to her personally off of a freight boat. Now I don't know anyone else who buys a car this way. Maybe it's common in Japan, but I tend to doubt it. Either that or she's just stolen it. Do remember that the police were seizing every car of this make and model. So I'm not quite sure how she ended up with it. Now, possibly she hasn't heard of what's happened, but you'd think any ship bringing cargo in like that would have it impounded. After all, you can't just carry cargo around. You have to declare what your manifest is. So I'm not quite sure how this car slipped by. Either Kelly is a trillionaire with all kinds of money and had this car personally shipped to her under the radar, or she's just stolen it. I'm not sure which. Keep in mind that early in the episode she was driving a different red sports car. So now apparently she has two of them. So I'm not sure if she's fabulously wealthy or simply has some mild kleptomania when it comes to collecting red sports cars.
Hey, sweetie, remember me? Well, of course you do.
Oh no, don't tell me that pest is here again!
Sorry, I thought you were somebody else, but I can see now that you're new around here. Whoa, the shine on your chrome is boosting my revs into Redline City.
Oh, rats! He's talking to my car again!
Wait, where are you going? Was it something I said?
Oh, Sideburn, it wasn't something you said. It was everything you say.
That's Sky-Byte, one of the Predacons! Huh? Oh, of course it is! Who do you think I was chasing? Yeah, right.
Please don't hurt my new car!
I've got to admit, this is the worst case of road rage I've ever seen. Predacon, you're under arrest! Prowl, jet boosters! Halt, Predacon!
Autobot, I warn you, if you try to interfere with my mission, you'll suffer the consequences!
Interesting note, Prowl's jet boosters are an actual feature of the toy. You can actually attach his flamethrower weaponry to the back of the vehicle along the rear fin like that to actually give a jet-propelled look.
Prowl, transform!
Here's a tip for you. Never ignore a warning from a shark. Now get out of my way, Autobot.
Sideburn, transform!
You choose to ignore my warning? Such insolence and disrespect will not be tolerated.
Transform!
Here's a tip for you. Never ignore a warning from a shark. Now get out of my way, Autobot.
Sideburn, transform!
You choose to ignore my warning? Such insolence and disrespect will not be tolerated.
You'll note here how obsessed Sky-Byte seems to be about his warnings. Again, this is an attribute of the earlier Sky-Byte that took himself far more seriously and considered himself to be a significant threat. Later episodes will make this scene seem very weird indeed. Also, a neat little feature you'll notice with Sideburn is that you can actually see his gun attached to him at his waist, behind him. This is actually where the gun is stored on the toy. For those of you wondering why I keep mentioning the accuracy here and there, you have to remember that prior to Robots in Disguise Beast Machines had come out. And Beast Machines was infamous for being the least toy accurate of any Transformer series ever. Now, a lack of accuracy between the show models and the toys is not at all uncommon in Transformers. It's plagued the franchise since the very beginning. Just look up a picture of the original Ironhide and a picture of his toy, and you can see the remarked difference. Nevertheless, this is actually typically rarer. Most show models are at least based off the toy, and if there is an alteration, it's usually an attempt to make the show model appear better, to appear cooler, or more realistic, better proportioned. It's usually meant to be an improvement. Beast Wars also followed this. The show characters were heavily based off of their toy appearance, modified to fit the particular style of the CGI art. But nevertheless, if you picked up a Beast War toy, you could generally recognize it as the Beast War character. Beast Machines basically threw all of this out the window. And the people who'd made the toys and the people who made the show basically didn't collaborate at all beyond perhaps the very earliest concept sketches. I have no idea why it was done this way. Probably the time Hasbro just didn't think that it mattered, or just decided that it didn't matter, and that fans wouldn't care. They were, of course, wrong. And part of the backlash against Beast Machines was the inaccuracy of the show and toy models to each other. I think this carried over, despite the fact that Car Robots is Takara-backed. I think they, if you will, almost overcompensated by making darn sure that the show character models were as accurate as possible to the toy characters. Hence why much of the features that you see on the show model, such as X-Brawn's head actually being in his SUV's cabin, are accurate to the toy. An attempt to win back some of what they had lost with the fans. I actually do appreciate when the models are accurate to the toys. It definitely is always cool to see little features like that.
Well, it's been fun playing with you two, but recess is over. Shark missile! Happy motoring!
Come back here!
Again, here we see a bit of the crossover. The Transmetal 2 Cyber Shark was capable of firing missiles from his mouth when in vehicle mode. Technically, you could probably do this in beast mode as well, but obviously you aren't meant to. But here we see where Sky-Byte has kind of a hybridization of his beast mode and vehicle mode, and is able to fire his shark missiles while in beast mode. In fact, Sky-Byte is treated as a genuine threat in this episode. Not only is he capable of fighting two Autobot brothers at once, but he can do it while in beast mode. And his shark missiles are explosive enough or have some unusual feature that actually apparently forces the Autobots back into vehicle mode, allowing him to escape. Well, a pity he does not retain this competency throughout the series.
Ha-ha! That's the car slapper! We found it!
I must be dreaming. Either that or I should be put in the nearest nut house.
Gotcha! We did it! We got the car!
Careful, you clumsy fools! One false move and that device will detonate and blow all of you into oblivion. I shall take it to Megatron. Now hand it over to me.
It's ours. We found it and we're taking it in. Get going, guys. Let's go!
Get out of my...
Yeah!
Now, while you'll note I said the Predacons, the Three Stooges, did seem like they were afraid of Sky-Byte. They are not as afraid of him as Megatron, clearly. And I actually do like this little bit here in Robots in Disguise. Predacons always squabble amongst themselves and always try to take the credit. Beast Wars showed this quite well, and so Robots in Disguise, it's nice to see them at least neutralizing a little bit of that. The Three Stooges, you see, are essentially a team. They don't really squabble amongst themselves all that much, but Sky-Byte to them is an outsider. They're quite happy to swoop in and steal the goods and take credit for it back at the base with Megatron.
That's no way to carry a bomb! Shaking it like that could cause it to detonate! Now hand it over and I'll fly it to the command center!
Hey, you're not the only one who can fly, Tuna Breath! Take it, Darkscream! Good thinking, Gas Skunk! Adios, Overbite!
Now note here, The show does refer to Darkscream as being able to fly. This is something that Robots in Disguise apparently can't quite make up its mind about, since other episodes he will claim that he cannot fly, although perhaps he's bluffing. Now, Darkscream referring to Sky-Byte as Overbite is meant as an insult, but it's interesting to note that is also the name of a Transformer, who is also a shark. One of the Seacons, I believe, unless it's one of the Terracons, I think it's a Seacon, is a shark with legs and arms, not unlike a Sharkacon, who is indeed called Overbite.
I just know I'll wake up any second!
I've got the bomb!
My beautiful red sports car! Don't worry, I'll save ya!
Now that I've got the device, I have to deliver it to Megatron!
Oh no! My beautiful sports car is gone! Prowl, transform! Don't worry, I've got you! Sorry, ma'am. I do apologize for the inconvenience. Are you alright?
For someone who's been attacked by a giant flying squirrel and a huge toad, a maniacal shark and a monstrous skunk, sure, I'm just fine.
Now here again is one of those weird things about Sideburn's flirting. It seems like he has trouble distinguishing between the human and the car, because he acts like he's here to save the car, deliberately clearly saves the human, and then seems disappointed and actually drops her. Again, you can see why Sideburn is not really anyone's favorite character, especially in these early episodes. Now here's where the whole robots in disguise concept seems to break down. Now, Kelly here is obviously somewhat traumatized from her recent experiences, but it's going to be difficult to hide your existence when you are catching humans falling out of the sky. Not to mention, he's standing on the highway in broad daylight. You can see the buildings in the background, no doubt filled with humans. How exactly is it that nobody knows these Autobots and Predacons are running around?
This device contains enough power to recharge all our fuel cells. We'll convert its energy as soon as I reach the command center. Think again, Hoss. What the? This little chunk of energy's going with me. You clumsy Autobot! Now that you've handled it so roughly, the device has armed itself! Ha! Thanks to your own heavy-handed clumsiness, you're gonna have to give the device back to me! You really have no other choice! Says who? It could go off any second. It won't be dangerous if I fly away with it, but if you keep it, the whole city could be destroyed. I didn't roll off the assembly line yesterday. You just want it back so the Predacons can suck out the energy.
I have a feeling it's gonna get real unhealthy around here in a minute or two. What do you say we get out of here, boys?
You know, that's the best idea I've heard all day.
Hey, when you're right, you're right. Every Predacon for himself!
Dude, I got a bad feeling about this. Yeah, if what Sky-Byte says is true, thousands of lives are in danger. We've got to get that bomb away from the city, but we're almost out of time. X-Brawn, you've got to take that bomb someplace where the explosion will do the least amount of damage.
I won't have time to get very far, and we're right in the middle of the city. Where should I take it? Any suggestions?
Take it to the top of the highest structure you can find. The higher it is, the less damage it'll do.
The highest structure? Right. I'm on my way. Yeehaw! Riding cowboy! Here we go!
Now, in keeping with his off-road personality, here we see X-Brawn, frankly, web-slinging throughout the city. I have no idea why he's doing this instead of driving it. I don't see it that this is at all safer for the explosive device. This grappling hook feature of X-Brawn does pop up from time to time in the show, but he doesn't use it very often.
What he's doing is awfully dangerous. Where is he going with that thing?
He's trying to get to the top of that radio tower. Do you have any idea how tall it is?
500 feet.
Then we better start thinking about a plan B.
Made it! Now I just gotta get up to the top. It's no use. Even at this height, it will destroy the city, so hand it over.
He's right, X-Brawn. If that thing goes off at 500 feet, the city will be demolished. In order to save the city, you're gonna have to take that thing a whole lot higher, like into the stratosphere, or maybe even farther.
Of course. That's the answer.
What he's doing is awfully dangerous. Where is he going with that thing?
He's trying to get to the top of that radio tower. Do you have any idea how tall it is?
500 feet.
Then we better start thinking about a plan B.
Made it! Now I just gotta get up to the top. It's no use. Even at this height, it will destroy the city, so hand it over.
He's right, X-Brawn. If that thing goes off at 500 feet, the city will be demolished. In order to save the city, you're gonna have to take that thing a whole lot higher, like into the stratosphere, or maybe even farther.
Of course. That's the answer.
Alright, so here we see Koji's contribution to the cause, as he is the guy that comes up with the idea that the bomb needs to be even higher up than the tallest structure. I'm not convinced the Autobots wouldn't have figured that out for themselves, but we had to make him relevant somehow, because heaven forbid we shouldn't have a human character in our Transformers cartoon somewhere. This is really why most fans dislike human characters in Transformers. They're often shoehorned in with not really any purpose or anything to contribute. Say what you will about Michael Bay films, at least a good amount of his human characters are military and actually contribute to the plot of the films because they can actually capable of fighting. Granted, it could be done better, but it's a step up from most of the Japanese Takara import human characters.
Well now, you've come to the end of your rope. Excellent. Give me the bomb. Looks like the cavalry got here just in time. Optimus Prime, transform! Hello, Sky-Byte. There's nothing you can do, Optimus. I beg to differ. Optimus Prime, optimize!
Now here we see Optimus Prime pull out the big guns. Yes, the back half of his trailer combines with the robot mode to make a sort of super robot mode, if you will. Although combine is not the right term for it. And this was a major problem that Transformer fans had with this particular incarnation of Optimus Prime. The fire engine mode, in of itself, was fine. Again, keep in mind, this isn't the Optimus Prime, but a parallel universe's version of him. So the fact that he has a slightly different alt mode is understandable, and most people don't really care about it one way or the other. However, the way this particular version of Prime transforms is that basically the fire engine splits in half. The front half is the part that actually transforms into the robot, not unlike the cab with the original Optimus Prime. Keep in mind that Optimus Prime, the original, was actually 3 components. He was the cab, the trailer, and a small drone known as Roller. And both the cab and the trailer transformed, although unfortunately Roller did not. And it would have been neat if he transformed into, a handgun of some kind, or maybe a turret that could attach to the trailer. Something to make him more integrate into the larger units. The trailer itself would transform into a kind of a gun deck command center sort of area. Unfortunately, nowadays Optimus doesn't really come with trailers, which is a real shame. It would be nice if they would actually make an Optimus Prime that actually had a trailer that would just, nothing fancy about it, just simply opened up into sort of a command deck with an armory wall to store his weapons and maybe a gun or something to defend itself with, and have a little command center for your figures. It's certainly what we all wanted for a figure for the original Optimus Prime, and to date, Hasbro has never really delivered this. Beyond the original version of Optimus Prime, there's never been a proper, quintessential version of Optimus Prime, interestingly enough. We simply get sort of almost incomplete variants of him usually. Often nowadays, he doesn't come with a trailer at all, which is a shame. But with this version of Optimus Prime, the back half of him doesn't transform. It's not a trailer, so it's not a complete thing in its own right. And granted, by the front half transforming is reminiscent of just the cab transforming, it is also not a vehicle in its own right. So basically, you just have 2 vehicle components now, one of which transforms into a robot and one of which does not. And you basically can take it apart in the back half instead. Kind of think of it like Lego bricks almost. it simply splits up into, I think, about 9 pieces total. Some of these individual components do transform, if you will, but again, from one component form to a second component form. And they can be reattached together to make a sort of pseudo base mode. It's basically a radar station with weapons. And it, of course, doesn't move. Which does mean that if Optimus Prime walks across the battlefield and suddenly finds himself needing to transform again, he can't because he left the back half of him on the other side of the battlefield. To top it off, it's not too unusual these days to find an Optimus Prime who can combine with his trailer. Again, not a feature that I necessarily think Optimus Prime needs. This is much more of an Ultra Magnus thing, but it's fine to have, the occasional version of him that does. Power Master Optimus Prime combines with his trailer, for example. So it's not unknown. But when you combine, to be a proper combiner, or to properly combine with something, 2 components basically transform to their combination forms and then connect together to form the larger robot. This is not how Fire Convoy Optimus Prime works. And you can even see it in the transformation sequence that he goes through. The back half falls apart into its individual component, which, like I said, I think there are about 7. And he essentially wears it. He's basically wearing gear rather than combining. He's got the 2 shoes that go onto his feet. He's got the 2 gauntlets that go over his hands. He's got the 2 shoulder plates that go over his shoulders. And then he's got the sort of chest plate, head, back combo, which I guess makes 7 components. So perhaps not quite as bad as 9, but still 6 too many. Now, the resulting look, I'll grant it, is actually pretty cool. I actually quite like Optimus's combined form here. And the toy is quite large, super class. If you're curious, we've not really talked about the different Transformer sizes. Toys would come in a basic, which ran for about $5 or slightly more dollars. A Dual-X, which was close to twice as big as a basic, not quite, and tended to run between $10 to $12 or so dollars. A Mega, coincidentally what Sky-Byte is, which would run for about $15 plus dollars. And then typically the largest Transformer you would get would be an Ultra, which ran to about $20, $25 something dollars. Again, back at the time. Prices, of course, fluctuate and change throughout the years, especially due to inflation. And who's in the White House, frankly, will also contribute to cost. Introduced at the end of Beast Wars, though, was the Super Class. And then Beast Machines, in fact, introduced a size even larger called Supreme Class, which was the largest until the Titan Class, which came out only a couple of years ago, really, as part of Transformers Generations. When combined, Optimus Prime here is a very tall, super class-sized robot. The show developers, at least in the American version, never did quite seem to come up with a proper command code for Optimus to assume this form. My favorite was the one actually used here, Optimize, which works really well with Optimus Prime, really thematic. But I suppose it'd be a bit difficult if you ever had another Transformer who had a similar ability, but whose name wasn't Optimus. Optimus will also refer to this as Battle Mode, Super Mode, and 1 or 2 other names. And they never really seem to quite stick to one of them, as is the case with all their command codes. But I think it's a shame. I believe he only uses Optimize this one time, which was really the best out of all of his command codes for this form.
X-Brawn, listen up. Switch into robot mode and then throw that device as far and as high as you can.
Why, sure. 100 mile and then some. X-Brawn, transform! Foolish Autobots! I'll catch up to it in no time!
Activate power stream targeting mechanism. Locked on. Power stream. Fire!
Look! Optimus is using his power stream to send the bomb into space! And it's so cold outside the Earth's atmosphere that the water covering Sky-Byte will freeze him like an ice cream cone!
I'll get you for this, Optimus!
careful. The slightest vibration will set it off. I'll have to use my gentlest bite. I believe I may have bitten down just a teensy weensy too hard. Careful. The slightest vibration will set it off. I'll have to use my gentlest bite. I believe I may have bitten down just a teensy weensy too hard.
Now, I can't be quite sure, but this episode almost gives me the feeling that Sky-Byte was not originally meant to be a series regular. It almost actually appears that he's been killed off, actually, in this scene here, and I wonder if that actually may have sort of been the original intention. Although, Robots in Disguise, again, Takara makes its shows for little kids, never kills off anyone. But the way his character is handled, so much like an outsider, sort of freelancer, one could almost think that maybe he was at least meant to be blown off into space somewhere and possibly not seen again. Or maybe he could have been a recurring character. If that was the case, the developers of Car Robots changed their mind, because he does become a series regular from this point.
Sky-Byte must have shaken a boat loose in that explosion. Now he's reading books. What for? He says once we understand humans, we can trick him into giving us their energy.
What sort of nonsense is this? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times? Best or worst, make up your mind!
Does Sky-Byte really think he's gonna learn how to understand humans by reading that stuff?
To be or not to be, this guy can't make up his mind either.
It's not gonna work. Of course not. Humans are all crazy.
So as you can see, Sky-Byte survived with minor injuries, a single cast for his normal arm and a couple of band-aids. Now, I will give Robots in Disguise credit for this, which I did not realize when I first watched this series, but upon rewatching it, is it actually does a fair bit of foreshadowing. Robots in Disguise is actually one of the best, ironically, one of the best Transformers series for foreshadowing. Sky-Byte's box describes him as a sort of poet warrior, which actually fits with the sort of romanticized viewpoint Sky-Byte has of himself. And he will, in fact, later on in the series, spout poetry, specifically in the form of haikus. Get Japanese-made show. This is apparently where he gets it from. He starts reading human literature here in an attempt to understand humans. Why he's trying to understand humans, though, this series doesn't even really have him interact with humans here. And humans are not, at least as far as Sky-Byte knows, the reason his plans were foiled. It was the Autobots. and not due to the Autobots' knowledge of humans. So this kind of does come out of nowhere, and like I said, I think its only purpose is simply to, at least in the American version, is to foreshadow Sky-Byte's eventual dip into poetry. Although, while he does do it, it's actually relatively rare, probably for the best. Now, like with last time, there are a couple of differences between the Car Robots episode and the Robots in Disguise episode from the Japanese and American versions. Mostly as an attempt on the American side to kind of clean up the plot, try to make it at least slightly less ridiculous, a little bit more coherent. Again, remember, Takara makes their shows for little children, Hasbro makes them for teens and young adults. Minor differences include when Koji meets up with Optimus Prime in the beginning of the episode, Car Robots has Koji calling Fire Convoy, whereas Robots in Disguise has Optimus calling Koji. Now, supposedly, Car Robots is set in Tokyo, whereas Robots in Disguise is supposedly set in Metro City. You can clearly see the Golden Gate Bridge right before the Predacon base, which clearly puts this up in San Francisco. The radio tower is supposedly supposed to be Tokyo Tower. If you've never heard about it, don't worry about it. It's semi-famous if you live in Japan, but not as well known as, say, Big Ben or the Statue of Liberty or the Pyramids of Giza. Most likely, this is coincidence, though. For one thing, the size is wrong. Tokyo Tower is actually 1,093 about feet tall, whereas the radio tower of the show is only about 500 feet. Clearly not meant to be the same building. Another difference, again harkening back to the first episode, while Robots in Disguise implies that X-Brawn is climbing the radio tower to get a better view of the city, Car Robots implies that he's actually just goofing off like Sideburn was chasing a red sports car. Again, the middle brother Prowl is the only one to actually stick to the mission. In Car Robots, the Three Stooges are actually confused as to why humans would even need such a bomb. Again, this is sort of neat because it has them viewing humans as mysterious and alien, which to the Predacons they would be. In Robots in Disguise, of course, instead they're more concerned about the bomb going off prematurely. In Car Robots, Sky-Byte also doesn't recognize Prowl and Sideburn or Autobots until the two of them transform. Again, implying his sort of freelancer, he's just popped up out of nowhere kind of status. However, in Robots in Disguise, he's aware of who they are. A completely added scene, recycling some of the footage and combining them, has Prowl come up with the idea to take the bomb to the highest structure. Car Robots, X-Brawn actually comes up with this idea on his own. Now, the ending scene we discussed just a minute ago is also different in Car Robots. Rather than observing that Sky-Byte is reading books, the Predacons actually imply in Car Robots that he does this frequently, and they're actually talking more about how they are impressed that he survived such an explosion. Whereas Robots in Disguise, they don't treat his survival as anything particularly miraculous, and treat it as if he's read the books for the first time. Again, kind of foreshadowing his future poetry references. Now it's time to address the elephant in the room. For many American audiences, they never saw this episode. It did get released in other Western countries, but this episode actually aired, or was supposed to air, during the morning of 9/11. Yes, that 9/11. And indeed, when I originally watched this series, when it was aired, I never saw this episode. It wasn't until I watched the reruns. Because they spent all day, of course, running the footages of the terrorist attack that happened. So I actually never got a proper introduction to Sky-Byte because of that, and the character was even more random to me when he just showed up out of nowhere in episode 3, and in a command-like position. While Megatron specifically states that Sky-Byte is in command of this mission, he's pretty much treated as Megatron's second in command of the Predacons. And indeed, in the show, he is the only other Predacon introduced. That's right, there are only 5 of them. Now, as I said before, maybe there are more elsewhere, and there's only 5 on Earth, but it's a very small number of them. Still, I wanted to make sure I addressed this issue, because I'm sure someone in the comments will mention that they've never seen this episode or mention the terrorist attack on 9/11. Indeed, if I can wax philosophical for a moment, I turned on the TV to watch Robots in Disguise is actually how I found out about the terrorist attack, and I spent all day afterwards watching the news network, and I actually was there to see the towers fall. Even it's one of those things. People say that those who lived through World War II all know what they were doing and where they were the day Pearl Harbor was attacked. And it's the same way for those of us that lived through the 9/11 terrorist attacks. I can remember exactly where I was, who I was with, and who I called, even. Some friends of mine. It's a pretty sombering memory, even to this day. And I'm certainly grateful that such a terrorist attack like this has never occurred again. And hopefully never will on American soil or anywhere else, but unfortunately throughout the years following there have been many terrorist attacks nearly on the same scale in some cases. Although I don't think any of them, as yet anyway, has been quite as bad as this one was. If only characters like Optimus Prime and the Autobots were real, perhaps they could have prevented this. But such a thing, of course, can never be. Now, for my opinion on this episode, I really don't consider the plot to be all that much more interesting or engaging than the first one. I would really rate this episode a 3. Again, remember, 1 is the worst, 5 is average, and 10 would be excellent. So this is, while not the worst, sub-average. Arguably, it's got a little bit more action than what went on the first episode. It does serve to introduce us to a new character in Sky-Byte, and certainly helps to flesh out Ty's character, but really there's nothing of significance that happens here. So the only really important thing we've learned is that the Predacons need Energon, or energy to convert to Energon. Energon, if you're not aware of it, is the Transformers' fuel source. Again, remember, they're alien robots, so the energy they use is, of course, alien, and it takes the form of something called Energon, usually stored in cubes, although it doesn't necessarily have to be. Even as far back as the original series, in the 80s, they are capable of taking energy made by humans and converting it to Energon, allowing it to fuel themselves. Indeed, this plot point in its entirety actually somewhat references the original series, because that's often what the Decepticons did in the early seasons of the original 80s series. For awards, I would give this another B for boring. I would give it a Waspinator for Kelly. I will not go quite so far to penalize this episode for Sky-Byte. He is treated in this episode as at least by Predacon standards, semi-competent. And if nothing else, we are introduced to his fighting prowess. Whenever he directly engages Autobots head on, he's actually so far undefeated. He's really only taken out from a shot from Optimus Prime in his super robot mode from behind. Although, frankly, he should have seen that coming. Again, I would also award this a bow for polite combat etiquette, as the characters did go through and announce their weaponry when using it again. So that was episode 2 of Robots in Disguise, an explosive situation. Until next time, thanks for watching.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shore of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near 10 hours ago.